How you doing today, Steve?
Terrific. How are you?
Pretty good. 78 Sports TV. I remember watching a documentary. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember you sharing a story about how when Mike Tyson was a contender, and then when he became the youngest heavyweight champion in history, he was still actually living with you. Can you go back to that story for us?
Sure. In late '84, Mike was going to turn pro after the Olympics, and he had hurt his hand though, and he had to postpone that debut. And when he hurt his hand, we had a very famous hand doctor in New York, a Customato, asked Mike to go for 2 weeks to New York City to have hand therapy, and Mike stayed in my apartment for the 2 weeks, and that's when we became pretty good friends. When Mike turned pro, Cuss permitted Mike 1 day off in between fights. Since they were so close together, that's about all the time Mike had. And Cuss asked me, Steve, if it's okay, can Mike come down and stay in your apartment for that 1 day? I said, absolutely yes. As the weeks and months went by, Mike, of course, was sleeping on the couch. I had the bedroom because I was paying the rent. And as the weeks and months went by, he was a 4-round fighter, 6-round fighter, 8-round fighter, 10-round fighter. And then one day, I came out of my bedroom, and there on the couch is the heavyweight champion of the world. And you can imagine what that would feel like. It would be like having a young David Beckham sleeping on your couch. You know, everyone would go, holy mackerel, you know. And he wasn't just the heavyweight champion. He was the youngest heavyweight champion of all time, an explosive knockout puncher. And it was a long time ago. Most people remember the bad Mike Tyson, the period of 1989 through 2000, the ear biting and his conduct, of course, the rape conviction. But back then in 84, 85, 86, 87, Mike was huge and hugely popular, doing commercials on network television for Pepsi Cola, Nintendo film, Kodak film, Nintendo video. He was hired by the New York City Police Department to be their spokesperson. Big posters all over New York City with a big picture of Mike saying it takes a bigger man than me to be a New York City police officer. He was hired by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Drug Enforcement Administration to do a commercial on TV to keep kids off drugs. And the European Associated Press in 1987 voted him the world's most popular athlete. Actually, he was tied with Diego Maradona, this great legendary soccer player.
Yeah.
And Mike was voted the world's most popular athlete, not the best athlete, not even the best boxer, most popular. That's how big he was back then because of the people around him. Customato, Caton, Jacobs, the friends Mike had in New York. The people around him had tremendous character, very high, solid character. But once he got away from that, once Don King took him over, that was very different. So for me, having Mike live with me, even when he won the heavyweight championship, he still slept on the couch. He had no car, didn't want one, no jewelry. He didn't even have clothes. I mean, he stayed in my apartment. I would wash my clothes and put on my underwear, and they're all stretched out. I say, Mike, man, get your own underwear. He said, nah, I don't want to spend any money, you know. And the reason he didn't want to buy things, or the reason he didn't want to spend any money, was a simple one. When I went to work during the day, there was no fights, and he would relax. He would invite over women and entertain them, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. So if a guy can have the woman he wants entertaining during the day over and over, there's no need to impress anybody, to get cars or jewelry, which I used to do to impress women, and it didn't work. But he was the happiest kid in the world. When you look at his face back then, in every video, every interview, his eyes were sparkling, and his demeanor was almost pristine. That's why he was hired by those companies. But of course, Don didn't want that type of demeanor, and that all changed in '89 when Mike went off.
I also want to ask you, I appreciate that story. I want to ask you, you know, like you went into it a little bit about how Mike is perceived, how he was perceived. It's kind of changing now, but he was perceived for a while as a villain, a monster, blah, blah, blah. But I remember, like you said, in the 80s, he was always a compassionate, even after he would knock a guy out and go check on him, make sure he was okay. He seemed to have a friendly nature about him. And how exactly did Mike end up with Don King? Because my personal belief is that Mike started fighting differently once Kevin Rooney left the picture. But can you go, if you know anything about that, could you explain how he got with Don King and how Kevin Rooney ended up leaving?
Yes, it's if this was a Hollywood movie, people would say it's not possible. The beginning was, of course, in 84, 85, 86, 87, Mike is fighting. The history you know, custom motto, youngest heavyweight champion, commercials on TV, spokesperson for the happiest kid in the world. In late 87, he says, he's dating women, incredibly beautiful women, Suzette Charles, Miss America, Naomi Campbell, the superstar model, Robin Givens. And one day in late 87, he called me and he said, Steve, what do you think if I marry Robin? I knew Mike deep down would have loved to have a family and kids and be more secure, and I thought it'd be more, give him a stable feeling, a stable mindset. He'd be happier, better fighter. I said, Mike, that's great. What I didn't know is that Robin told him she's pregnant with his baby, and that same day, Robin's mother called Bill Cate and Jim Jacobs and said, I demand that Mike marry Robin. So that was the beginning. Of course, Robin lied about being pregnant and just to marry Mike. And the question became, some people say, well, she was very, very well-to-do, Robin. She was on a TV show, head of the class, making tens of thousands of dollars a week. What does she need Mike Tyson's money for? And a buddy of mine in New York, a police officer, said, Steve, it's very simple. Mike was making serious money, the type of money people kill for. So Robin and her mother, who had no character or conscience, it was easy pickings. She said she was pregnant. They got married. It's 1988. We fight the Holmes fight. We fight the Tubbs fight. Come back. She loses the baby magically. No doctor ever came forward to say she was pregnant or not. The summer of 88 becomes a horror story with her trying to break the contract with Bill Caton so she can take over Mike, because there was tons and tens of millions of dollars to be made. And then the funniest thing happened. Don King, behind her back, gave Mike a contract to sign to be his exclusive promoter. Don knew that if Robin could break Mike away, why shouldn't he take advantage of Mike also? Mike, being the dutiful husband, gave the contract to Robin and said, hey, Don gave me this. It's your business. You do what you want to do with it. She gave it to her attorneys, and her attorneys reported back to her that if Mike signs this contract, Don will be able to steal every buck Mike makes. So what did Robin do? She went back to Bill Caton, renegotiated the agreement, had Mike apologize to Bill, and rehired Bill to be the manager. Then it gets worse. October 1988, the famous Barbara Walters show, where Robin puts Mike on to tell the world that he's manic depressive and that he hits her and he does all this crazy stuff. And I'm looking at that, I'm saying, well, why didn't he act like this in my apartment for year after year after year? And the craziest thing he ever said to me, under tremendous pressure of being the youngest heavyweight champion, the craziest thing he ever said was, Steve, how come you ate up all the vanilla ice cream? And that was it. So I knew Mike. I knew that she was torturing him for the specific reason to put him on a public stage so that once he announced that he was manic depressive, which he did on the show, that very shortly she can file for a divorce. Mike already said he is manic depressive, he's crazy. So it'd be easy for her. And the next day, after the Barbara Walters show, Mike's friends told him on the phone that I can't pronounce the word too well. She dissed you, Mike. She dissed you. She did really bad stuff by having you on the show. We know you're not crazy. Mike and Robin had a big fight. They broke up. Mike came back to our office the following day to say, hey, guys, I'm so sorry for putting you through all this stuff with her and the lawyers. Bill Caton was completely compassionate. He knew, number one, Mike wasn't crazy. He said, Mike, the first thing we have to do to you, you're not crazy, because I know you're not, and Steve knows you're not. I'm bringing in the world's most famous psychiatrist tomorrow. I guarantee he'll be here. You come over too. Mike comes the next day. Psychiatrist shows up, Dr. Abraham Halpern, an incredibly well-known psychiatrist, brings Mike into a room for a couple hours to talk to him, comes back upstairs, and the psychiatrist says Mike is fine. He's very unhappy about what's going down, but all he needs to do is get back to fighting in his regular routine. Who said he's manic depressive? And Bill said, well, Robin had a doctor here in New York City who started giving Mike this very, very dangerous chemical called lithium to keep Mike under control. And in the office, Abraham Halpern said, get the doctor on the phone, I want to speak to him. Bill King gets his Dr. McCurtis from New York Hospital on the phone. Abraham Halpern gets on. Of course, we can only hear Abraham Halpern's side of the conversation. Dr. Halpern says, Dr. McCurtis? Yes, this is Abraham Halpern here. Yes, that's right, Abraham Halpern. So obviously McCurtis said, holy mackerel, Abraham Halpern. Dr. McCurtis, you prescribed lithium to Mike because of his being manic depressive? Is that your diagnosis? That wasn't your diagnosis. So why did you prescribe lithium? You didn't prescribe lithium. Robin Givens got all these crazy things going on behind the scenes.
Wow.
Now, the biggest mistake made was mine. We had this conversation with Mike in the office with Bill. Once Mike knew that he wasn't crazy, Bill said, Mike, I'm going to get you more fights. We have a fight planned with Alison Rodriguez in Argentina, I think, or some South American country, then Bruno, and then Lennox, all these great, Van der Holy, all these fights lined up. Mike was thrilled. And Mike turned to Bill and said, can you get me more commercials on TV? Bill said, absolutely yes, Mike. We're going to get you more commercials. Mike was thrilled, and he walked out of the office. That was my mistake. My mistake was I didn't understand that Mike was still in pain from the Robin Givens episode. The next day, or 2 days later, Don King grabbed him, brought him to Cleveland, got him laid 44 times a day, took his mind off Robin Givens, and a week later, Mike calls and says, hey, Steve, I'm here in Cleveland. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I said, great. 2 weeks later, Mike calls and says, you know, I've been thinking about my career, Steve. I'll call you next week. Okay. 2 weeks later, Steve, get Bill to send me all my contracts. And it was over. Mike and me, my mistake was letting Mike leave the office, not knowing that he was in emotional pain. What I should have done was, as Mike was walking out the Bill's office, I should have said, Mike, wait up by the elevator for 1 minute. He'd say, sure, okay, I'll be downstairs. I walked back to Bill King and I said, Bill, cash a check for me, I need $100,000. He said, well, what for? I said, I want to take Mike down to Rio de Janeiro, get him laid 44 times a day, take his mind off Robin Givens. He said, Steve, he'd say, what are you talking about? Bill, Mike is in pain right now. I know how I would feel if the woman of my dreams, I thought were my dreams, did this to me, I'd be dying. So I know he's hurting. If we don't do this, someone else will.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Don did. Took Mike's mind off Robin Givens. Within 3 weeks, Mike was asking for his contracts, and it was all over. Don knew, Don is actually a brilliant con man, that he knew that once Mike started the ball rolling against Bill, that Mike would never back up and say he made a mistake. He didn't do that in 89, 90, 91, 92. He goes to prison for the rape, comes out, goes back to Don in 95, 96, 97. $500 million of Mike's money gone, reputation gone, all of Mike's accountants gone, all of his advisors gone, all of his lawyers. Everyone around Mike was a Don King guy. And it's interesting that I was on the Larry King show. Do you guys get Larry King show over there?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was on Larry King show in 1992 as Mike was in the a case in Indiana for the rape. And before he went in, I was on, and they asked me about Mike's career, and I put a lot of the blame on Don King. And a caller, they were taking calls, and a caller came in. I didn't know if the guy was black or white, but it really didn't matter. And he said, Steve, sounds like, you guys are just jealous that Mike went with Don. I was hoping for that call. I was praying for that call. And I said to the guy calling in, I want to thank the caller for calling in because that's a very important question. Let me answer it like this. If Don had taken Mike away and made Mike a better fighter, got Mike more championships, got Mike more commercials on TV for Pepsi-Cola, Nintendo Video, got Mike more spokesperson roles for the police department, the FBI, the DEA, all of the things that Bill Cate and Jim Jacobs did. If Don did that, I'd take off my hat to him and say, Don, holy mackerel, I thought Cate and Jacobs did a great job. You surpassed that, congratulations. But that's not what happened, I told the caller. What happened was Don took Mike away, surrounded him with creatures of the night, the scum of the earth. Mike's demeanor slowly, calculatingly went back to a street mentality. Don knew that would happen. Mike's commercial endorsements gone. Mike's spokesperson roles gone. Mike's reputation in the world gone, going from the world's most popular athlete to the most unpopular celebrity in the world. I'm not jealous at Don King. I'm angry that he took this kid, this sensational fighter, my friend, and destroyed him. So that's what I did on Larry King Live, and the same thing holds true today. That's what Don did to Mike. If it was just the money, if Don just stole $500 million like he did, but Mike's reputation in the world was still pristine, I'd say, hey, Mike wouldn't even care, because you can imagine how it would feel. You're a hero doing commercials on TV. Everywhere you go, Mike, we love you. We love you. Newspapers, everything is positive. It feels pretty good. For me, it would feel pretty good. I'm sure for 99% of the world, it would feel pretty good. Now imagine that everywhere you go, people recognize you, like they do with Mike. Having that people come up to you is wonderful. But once your reputation is shot and you do horrible things, everywhere you go, people know who you are. It's a lot different. You go in to buy a cup of tea in the morning, and the person behind the counter says, oh, yeah, Mike Tyson. And you can hear them mumble, piece of junk mother thunder. That hurts everywhere you go. Every newspaper you open up, Mike Tyson bum, Mike Tyson loser, Mike Tyson demeanor. Every interview on TV, newscasters, people talking. Being a hero, going to that is very painful. So that's what bothered me the most, and I can tell you that's what bothered Mike the most. Not the money, but the reputation.
Definitely. I'd like to say, would you say with the pillars of the people around, and like you said, when Customato passed away, Jim Jacobs passed away, and the people, them sort of people as well. Obviously, you became estranged from Mike as well. Would you say because of that as well?
That's a tough question to answer. That's a good question. Because Mike was so solid when Cuss passed away, and he was so solid when Jim passed away, because he did fight the Spinx fight under tremendous pressure, and I'll tell you a story about that in a second. I think, and I was on the, Mike was pretty solid. It wasn't until Robin started that horrible ball rolling against Mike with the drugs and everything else that caused that. If it wasn't for Robin, I think Mike would have been solid. And I'll tell you why I think that. While Robin wanted to get rid of Bill very drastically because she couldn't steal all of Mike's money if Bill was putting it in the bank, the day before the Spinx fight in Atlantic City in 1988, it was the biggest fight in the history of the world. Mike had a friend, a man named Rory Holloway, his close friend, and Rory wanted to start a T-shirt business. And Bill Caton was a master of marketing, advertising. So Mike called Bill the day before the fight and said, Bill, I'm here with Rory. He'd like to start a T-shirt business. Any possibility you can meet with Rory anytime to talk to him about that? Bill said, Mike, anytime you want, I will help him 100%. And Mike said, can we come over now to your room at the hotel? Bill said, absolutely. They go over. Bill tells Rory Holloway, Rory, I'm going to help you in every step of the way. I'll work with you on the designs. I'll work with you on the examples. I'll work with you in getting you in to speak with these huge department stores. Back then it was Macy's and Gimbel's. And I'll work with you every step of the way to make this a success. And Rory said, wow, that's great. And Mike said, Bill, I thank you so much. What part of this do you want? What percentage? Bill said, Mike, this is for you and Rory. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. It's yours. And Mike said, wow, Bill, thank you so much. The next night at ringside, on the HBO camera was on Bill Caton at ringside. And the announcer says, "We've just been informed that Bill Cayton has been given a lawsuit subpoena by Robin Givens' attorney to break the Mike Tyson contract." Now, I know Mike pretty well. There's no way he can go to Bill Cayton's room the day before the fight and ask Bill for his help, knowing he's going to be suing him the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of evil machinations that were happening behind the scenes. I'm sure Robin didn't even know that that was happening. But that's the way Mike was with Bill to that point. It all ended when Robin, that summer of '88, rejuvenated a little while when Robin found out about Don King. But that was how solid he was to that point. Without Cuss, without Jim, Mike was pretty good under that tremendous pressure of the Spinx fight, at that time the biggest fight in the history of the world. So I think Mike would have been fine until he met Robin Givens and Don King.
Oh, okay. Well, you said you was going to say another little story?
Yes. I was having a little bit of trouble with Robin. I have to admit, I was calling her names to other people behind the scenes during the Spinx time period from May to June of 1988. She knew this. She had heard it from people. And she was kind of under control until one day she just burst out and said, "Steve, you're fired." And I said, "Well, let's see about that." And that day, actually, Mike, she was yelling at me and screaming at me and on the phone. And she said, "I'm going to get my husband to kick you in the freaking ass and bust your head." And I said, "Oh, gee, I don't." 2 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's Kevin Rooney. And he says, "Steve, Mike just got off the phone with Robin. There was yelling and screaming." I said, "I know. She just called me. Are you guys headed back here now?" "Yes, we are." I said, "Okay, I have to talk to Mike and just hope that he understands, that really nothing really transpired." And Kevin Rooney said, "I understand." Kevin comes up to the room. 2 minutes later, Mike walks right past me into his own bedroom.
Wow.
Closes the door. Well, at least I know he didn't punch me in the nose, okay? Then on the phone, I can hear him yelling and screaming to Robin, "Stay out of our business. You don't know anything what's going on here. Don't bother us. Don't bother me. Stay out of our business." Well, at least I knew that there was Mike being strength, and he knew that whatever I did, it wasn't something that would hurt him. A minute later, he walks out of his bedroom, leaves the front door to leave the apartment. I said, "Well, at least he didn't punch me again." And then 10 seconds later, he comes in and says, "Steve, come on, let's go for a walk." If Jennifer Lopez had asked me to go for a walk, it would not have been as important to me as Mike Tyson saying, "Let's go for a walk." So we start walking, and he starts to say, "Hey, Steve, she probably scared you when she started yelling at you, right?" I said, "Mike, you don't understand. It was like I was shaking." He said, "Steve, come on, man. I was shaking too the first time she yelled at me, but you're my brother, man. Forget it." I said, "Mike, I really appreciate that. Thank you." But that was before all the junk hit the fan. Mike was still solid. Once again, if it hadn't been for Robin, the summer of '88, the pregnancy, Mike would have gone down right there with Ali and Joe Louis.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he was on the cusp, definitely. I only remember the good things about Mike, to be honest with you, because I was listening to one of your interview you had online with some other guys, and to be honest with you, I'm not gonna go much into the ear biting, and I just want to talk about, because for me, I remember Mike Tyson when I was younger, like 15, and all the Nintendo games, I was playing all the games, and I was ITV obviously in London, and all the fights were coming early in the morning. I saw the Bruno fights. And I saw all the fights, but for me, it's the Buster Douglas thing really bothers me. Like, we had an interview with Dr. Tony Pacheco, and he's saying for the life of me that he didn't understand that the punches he was landing on Buster Douglas, that Buster Douglas could take them sort of punches, and then he was wondering how come Buster Douglas could take them punches and Mike could was it because of the training? Is it because of Kevin Rooney and the whole thing, or his mindset? What'd you say?
That's a great question also. A couple of things. Once again, your you're on TV, you're an actor, or you're conducting, you're a radio interviewer, and you conduct radio interviews.
Yeah.
If everything in your life is great, your wife is great, your kids are great, you just got a raise, you had your doctor examine you, everything is terrific with your health, you just got an Emmy award, an award from England. You go on that day on the camera behind the desk in the set to interview your first guest. You feel terrific, but if you're not doing well, if your company has told you you're going to be fired in 2 weeks, they cut your salary, your doctor told you have cancer, your wife is having a miscarriage, somebody stole your car, on the set that day, when you interview the other person, you're not going to feel so good. Now imagine if you're an athlete on a stage, even a soccer player. When they go on the field, if they're feeling great, that's fine. But if they're not, that's going to affect them too. All depends on your makeup. Now with Mike, there's some boxers it would not have affected. But Mike is very, very emotional. So, for the Douglas fight, he left Bill Caton. He knows he made a horrible mistake. Millions of dollars are being taken from him that he knows behind the scenes, his paydays. He loses his commercial endorsements. His demeanor starts to change. Don King fires Kevin Rooney. Mike knows that he left Bill. He left me. The training process, I don't know what had transpired over there, but obviously it wasn't strong enough. Now, Mike fights the fight. He goes back to his corner for the first couple of rounds. He's not doing well. He sits down and he starts to dwell. And dwell, I mean, it's almost like a tennis match. When the point is over and one player walks to the other side of the court to get ready for service, in that 6 or 8 or 10 seconds, your mind goes to a different place for a moment. Maybe your mom, your dad, your car, your girlfriend. For a split second, it goes. Then you get up, ready to serve, and you're back on track. That happens in football and baseball and soccer. Maybe there's a timeout. The mind dwells. In boxing, it's in the corner when the guy sits down. Usually, for Mike, in 85, 86, 87, 80, 88, he sits down in the corner in a tough fight, maybe the Tucker fight. He looks up at Kevin Rooney. He's thinking in his mind, boy, this guy Tucker is pretty good. And then all of a sudden Mike says to himself, wait a second. I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. I got Kevin Rooney. I got Caton. I got Jacobs. I'm doing commercials on TV. I'm a hero. I'm a superstar. I'm going to beat this guy. He gives himself every reason to win. Gets up, has just as much firepower in round 12 as he has in round 1. Now it's the Douglas fight. Comes back to his corner, let's say in round 4 or 5, sits down. Oh, shit, man, I got these jerk-offs around me. They don't even have an end swell. They got this big water bag. Man, all my money's being taken by King. The pressure on my butt. I dumped Steve. I dumped Kevin. Man, I wish I had Kevin here. He gets up for that round. There's less energy, less emotional energy, less emotional strength that he takes with him. Round 7, round 8, he scores that. Now it gets really weird. In round 8, he scores that tremendous one-punch uppercut that knocks Douglas down. Yeah. Douglas is on the canvas. The referee's counting.
Too long. The count's taking too long.
Well, he took a long, but here's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Now, you're right. Douglas should have stayed down. The whole count, whatever it was. And the press the next day would have said to Mike, it was a tough fight, but you scored a knockout. Congratulations. Count is 5, 6, 7. Once again, Douglas should have stayed down. And the fight would have been over. Mike, tough fight. Congratulations. Maybe next time. 8, 9. Douglas, remember, I don't know if you remember, Douglas is pounding on the canvas. He was trying to decide whether to get up or not. He was struggling mentally. 9 3/4. Douglas gets up at 9.999. Whether it was a real 9.9 or 15 sec, he got up. The next round, he beats up Mike, and round 10, he knocks Mike out. And what that was, in a strange way, it's almost mystical. When Douglas was on the canvas, it was almost like the powers above looked down on Mike and said, Mike, in the old days, 84, 85, 86, 87, everything that could go right for you went right, but no more. Now you're going to see what happens when you're when you do the wrong stuff, you want to go with King and Robin. Now watch what happens. Douglas gets up and knocks him out. And that's so amazing because from 84 to 88, every possible thing that could go right for Mike, everything he said, everything he did, everything that Customato did, and Caton and Jacobs went right. Once he went to Robin and Don King, every single thing that could go wrong went wrong. Every fight, the knockout, the rape, the ear biting, his demeanor, the press, the no commercials, every single thing, because it has to do with the people around you. So when Mike was drilled by Cuss to be that type of character, he emulated Cuss, and then Jim and Bill. But once he got to Don King carefully, calculatingly put guys around Mike. Mike knew, even in 84, 85, 86, he knew how to act like a street punk. He didn't forget that. But it was too much fun being a hero. What Don did brilliantly was put him back in the street mentality. And Don knew that he would never go back to Bill when he was thinking like that. And that's the way it worked out.
Wow.
Okay, I can like Don King. What I can't understand is how he would get rid of Kevin Rooney. Okay, it seems almost like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like he wanted to remove all of the positive influences around Mike. Would that be a fair statement?
Correct. Yes. And a little bit more than that. You brought up an excellent point, which I forgot. A little bit more than that. Let's suppose we're back in 1988, and by the way, Mike never fired Kevin Rooney. What happened was Don King had been paying off a newspaper writer, a guy named Mike Marley, to write articles for him and his company, and he had Mike Marley write an article that said Mike Tyson fires Kevin Rooney for certain statements, whatever they were. Mike never fired Kevin Rooney, but Don knew that once that was in the paper, that people would go up to the guys around Mike, Don King's cronies, will go up to Mike and say, "That was a good move, Mike. What do you need Kevin for?" The reason Don did not want Kevin around, Don really didn't care if Mike was not as good as he was. He was good enough. It was critical for Don to do one thing and one thing only: steal Mike's money. Now, if Kevin was around Mike, what would happen was Kevin would be the trainer. After the fight's over, the checks would be given out, and Don King would give Kevin his check for the trainer's fee. And Kevin would look at the check. Let's say there was the first fight. Let's say it was the Bruno fight, which was in Atlantic City. It was in Las Vegas in 1988. Was the first fight without us. Kevin would look at the check, and it would be like, a $200,000 check. And Kevin would say, "What's this?" And Don King would say, "Well, Mike made $2 million and you get 10%. And Kevin would say, "But this fight should have been a $10 million fight for Mike. $5 million from HBO, $5 million from the site, foreign sales. It's got to be at least the last thing Don wanted was someone around Mike going up to Mike and saying, "Mike, you should have got 3 times this amount of money." That could never stay with Don. There was no way he'd permit Kevin around or me or anyone like that to say stuff like that to Mike, because it would cause a huge furor behind the scenes. Don didn't want that.
Okay, so I get it now. So you're saying Kevin Rooney, as a trainer, gets paid a percentage of Mike's purse, so he would know how much he would get paid. So Don had to remove him so that he could steal Mike's money without any outside influences.
Exactly. Say about 90% of the time, 95%, a trainer gets a percentage of the fighter's money. Usually it's 10%. So, but, if a fighter's supposed to make $3,000, but he only makes $2,700, the trainer, instead of getting $300, gets $270. It's really not a big deal. But with Mike Tyson, if he's supposed to get $8 million and only makes $2 million, the trainer, Kevin Rooney, knew that the purses that Mike was making with Bill Caton were enormous purses, especially the Spinx fight before was the biggest purse in the history of boxing, $21 million. So Kevin, getting his 10%, was said, "Mike, you should have made at least $8 million in this fight. Where's the other $6 million?" So There's no way that Don would permit anyone around Mike, me or Bill or Kevin, to see any of those paperworks, because they would go to Mike and say, where's the rest of the money? All of Mike's attorneys were Don's attorneys. All of Mike's accountants were Don's accountants. All of Mike's managers, Rory and Holloway and John Horn, were Don's guys. So Don had to have complete control, and that's what they call, not a con job. It's called isolating the mark. In the movies, the mark is the guy or woman you want to take advantage of. If they're surrounded by good people or their own friends, it's very difficult to take advantage of them because they're being given advice by people who care about them. But if you isolate the mark, if you get the mark away from those people and put people around them that you control, now you've isolated the mark. It's much easier to take advantage of them, whether it's money or stocks or bonds or companies, anything. And what Don did brilliantly was isolate the mark, and that was Mike.
Wow. What you just said there, I can see it. It sounds like candy from a baby. But let me go back a bit further. So see the Teddy Atlas situation with Mike, and this is my question leading up to it. See the influence with Teddy, because I remember Teddy had an interview. I don't know if he was around. Yeah, I think he was around. You was around that time. Teddy, obviously, the influence with Mike was disrespecting his niece or stuff like that, and that situation with the gun. Would you say that the people, very the strong disappearance, disappearance that people around Mike from a very young age, and because Mike Tyson, I know Mike Tyson. He's complicit in a lot of these things that happen. I know, he's being manipulated, but would you say it's just the people around him from a very young age? Because I remember Teddy was saying he should have went to school and Costa was letting him get away with it. Can you go into that little thing from early in his teens?
Sure. Another great point you brought up. I would have forgot all about it. The incident with Mike and the niece and Teddy. Let's take Teddy's side for a second about that. The incident happened exactly like it did, and it was horrible. And Teddy goes to Cus and says, you got to get rid of Mike because he's no good and he's never going to develop and all this horrible stuff. And Cus said to Teddy, I understand how horrible this was. It was horrible. I will speak to Mike. I'm sure that he'll understand that it was horrible, that he'll apologize to you. He won't do it again. But I know, kids, you have to give him a chance. And Teddy said, forget it. He's got to go. He'll never be good. There's no way either he goes or I go. And Cus said, Teddy, I've been around a while. I think he's going to get better. I know he's going to get better. I can't say anything more. And Teddy said goodbye. Now, if Teddy was correct that Mike's discipline was a factor, then in 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, Mike would have shown it over that 6-year time period. He would have done horrible things, acted out horrible ways, all the things that Teddy predicted. But that's not what happened. Cus knew that a kid like Mike, a street thug, a bum off the street, had to have some time to develop. And Cus was right. 84, Mike was fine. 85, he turns pro, no problems. 86, becomes the youngest heavyweight champion of the world. And perhaps, maybe, I'm not a great historian, under more pressure than any other athlete in history, being the youngest heavyweight champion of all time. And remember now, in soccer, you can lose 3 games and still win the league. Yeah. In baseball, you can strike out 4 times and still hit the game-winning home run. In every sport, except boxing, 1 punch, the ball game is over. Mm-hmm. And the whole team rolled up and won. And Mike was the youngest heavyweight champion of all time. Doing tremendous in 87, commercials on TV, loved and adored, police department ads, FBI. Now, if Teddy was correct, none of that stuff would happen. But Teddy has never gone back and acknowledged that because it's a little embarrassing to think that he was wrong. And Cus had been around for 70 years. He knew that kid would have developed well, and Cus was right.
Okay, I want to ask you, we talked to the fight doctor, Freddie Pacheco, and he had some, pretty harsh words from Mike when we asked him how Mike would do in the era of Ali and Foreman and Frazier and those guys. Pacheco said that it's disrespectful to even mention Mike with those guys. And he said that Mike he was knocking out all bums. Now, I want to get your opinion on this because, this is Mike beat. He unified the heavyweight title, okay? And he's fighting top contenders all the time. I don't understand how people say he fought bums because he demolished them. Can you respond to that?
Yes, interesting topic. It's interesting that all you can do as a heavyweight champ is fight everyone who's there. And the question becomes, how do you do with them? So Mike fought against whoever was around at that time. And the fights that went the distance were, of course, the Tillis fight, which was his first 10-rounder. Then the Bone Crusher Smith fight, which was 12 rounds. Then the Tucker fight, which went 12 rounds. I really don't go into after 88 because that was the Don King era. So during that time period, Mike had some 12-rounders, which were, he didn't look that great. But he won almost every minute of every round. Now let's look back at Ali in 64, 65, 66, during his prime. I don't look at after the war because that's not the real Ali. He went 15 rounds with Ernie Terrell, who never threw a punch in the fight. He got dropped by Sonny Banks, a 175-pound fighter, the year before he won the title. He got rocked by Carl Mildenberger, a southpaw who chased him out of the ring. He got rocked by Zora Foley. He got rocked by Billy Daniels. He ran from a 54-year-old Archie Moore in their fight. He ran from a Floyd Patterson in 65 who couldn't even walk. He had a bad back. Now, Ali won all those fights. But in some of those fights, he looked really bad, average. As a matter of fact, if you turn off, and this is a trick for deciding who's exciting and who can really fight, the trick is you put on a fight, let's say Muhammad Ali, you turn off the sound, and you put on the Ernie Terrell fight. You turn off the sound, and you suspend your knowledge that one is Ali and one fighter is Terrell, and you watch the fight. And you say, after a round, nothing's happening here. This guy's running and running. Yeah, he can punch, but there's nothing happening. And you put on the Carl Mildenberger fight with Ali, turn off the sound, it's not Ali. Boy, this guy's getting chased out of the ring by this guy. I don't know who these fighters are, but it's a pretty boring fight. And the same thing with Patterson. And the same in Foley, you'd say, holy mackerel, this old guy is chasing him around. With Tyson, he's winning, moving forward every step of the way, never took a backward step, winning every moment of the fights. And in some of the fights, Berbick and Thomas and Biggs and Holmes, and he's blowing guys out. You say, holy mackerel, this guy, honey, don't bother me. I want to watch this kid fight. So it comes down to you can only fight who's in that era. But a lot of the guys that Ali fought, Mike would have blown out. 54-year-old Archie Moore, Terrell, those guys, which chasing Ali, it really wasn't even fair. Brian London and those guys with Mike. Now the question becomes Mike and Ali, man to man. And it's interesting that the type of fighter that bothered Mike the most, or I should say, the type of fighter that Mike could not knock out quickly, was the tall guys who moved a little bit. Tillis, Smith, Tucker, 10 rounds, 12 rounds, 12 rounds. But Mike won every minute of every round, going forward, chasing the other guys. Now look at Ali. The type of fighter he didn't like fighting, or he looked poor against, were the shorter guys coming in. The Sonny Banks, the Daniels, the Carl Mildenbergers, the Zora Foleys, even Floyd Patterson, who couldn't even walk, chased him around. So the difference is Mike winning every minute of every round against guys who were tall, but Ali getting rocked and dropped by guys. Oh, I forgot, Henry Cooper, your guy, dropping Ali before he fought for the title. Chasing him out, he rocked Ali. Now, Cooper was a terrific fighter, but he wasn't a Joe Frazier, and he wasn't, a Jack Dempsey. I don't think he was a Mike Tyson. But he dropped Ali. Ali, good thing was at the end of the round. So the type of fighter Ali didn't like was fighting that short guy coming in, throwing bombs. And Ali got hit, and he got hit often, pulling back and dropping his hand. So it would have made an interesting fight. My pick would have been the first time they fought, Ali would win. He'd win a decision. Mike would be very, very emotional. He'd be very nervous. He wouldn't be himself. The fight's over, and Mike would watch the videos and see, well, Ali really didn't do anything. He hit and moved. He didn't really catch me. Really, he's not a great puncher. The rematch is in 3 months. The rematch, I think Mike big time. He'd come in there winging shots, knowing there was no firepower coming back. And Ali dropping his hands and chin up in the air, I give Mike the edge after that. But neither guy is going to have a tough, easy time with the other guy. Mike's type of fight bothered Ali. Ali's type of fight bothered Mike.
Wow. It's a good assessment. As good as any. As good as any. So let me have this argument. Let me have this conversation with you. Let's go to the pound for pound conversation. I remember Bill Caton and I remember Bert Sugar sitting around the table discussing the pound for pound. So they had Henry Armstrong, they had Muhammad Ali, and they had Sugar Ray Robinson. Would you concur with obviously? Would you concur with that assessment, or would you put anyone else in there?
Well, I like to break it up a little further. There are a couple of categories which are very key, and that is pound for pound is one. Then there is most famous fighter of all time. Then most beloved fighter of all time, and then most exciting fighter of all time. Those are the four. The pound for pound, since you brought it up first, I would put Duran and maybe Sugar Ray Leonard right up there with Robinson as pound for pound. For most famous fighter of all time, I'd have to go with Ali, because I think there'd be very few guys more famous. Most beloved is Joe Louis, because as much as people like Ali now, they forget that during the war era he was hated and despised because of his stance against the Vietnam War. Even though he was vindicated, he was hated. And so Louis fighting for his country and giving his money up for the army during World War II, I think he's more beloved. Most exciting. That's a tough one, but I make it a toss-up between like Tyson, and there was a fighter in the 60s who was absolutely phenomenal named Fighting Harada, Masashiko Fighting Harada from Japan, and Aaron Pryor, when Aaron was really coming out bombing.
Wow.
So those four groups I would split up. Pound for pound is key, but Duran may not have been the most exciting fighter of all time. He definitely is not the most famous, and he's definitely not the most beloved. Even in the Latino audience, I think the edge might go to Chavez, for that whole era. So, but pound for pound, I like Duran for pound.
Wow. Well, this is probably one of the best conversations I've ever had. Chris, any other questions?
Well, yeah, I just want to concur with that. I really enjoyed this conversation. This is good knowledge here. What do you think of current boxers today? You have Floyd Mayweather out there. You have Manny Pacquiao, two very popular fighters that haven't been able to get into the ring because of a lot of politics. How do you feel about that situation?
Well, Pacquiao is a very exciting fighter. Once again, I use that analogy. If you put a fighter on a screen, you turn off the sound, you suspend your knowledge of who the fighter is, he comes out and there's action. Floyd is like watching paint dry. Unless the guy's in there pushing him, he's absolutely boring. There's nothing happening. You turn off the sound and you watch the fight. You watching? And you watch, and it's holy mackerel. It's like, and people forget that, yeah, he's very popular now, and he's a champion, but he's much like a Roy Jones type of fighter, or a Bernard Hopkins type of fighter, that there's nothing happening on the screen. Now, for some reason, the public gravitates toward watching those big fights. He only fights twice a year, and they're big fights, but they're not exciting. If Duran was around today, 140-pound Duran, and you told him you got to fight, Mayweather, he'd say, okay. The only problem, Roberto, is you get $77 million. The spit, the saliva would be coming out of his mouth, and he'd say, do we have to wait for the fight? Can we fight tonight? And the same thing, Tommy Hearns would have blown him out. Hagler, forget it. Mayweather wouldn't even show up. Those guys were just vicious fighters. Tommy Hearns, vicious guys. And there's nobody around like that today. It was a big disappointment with Canelo. You'd figure the opportunity of his lifetime to do something, even if you go out getting knocked out, you want to put on a show. Mayweather's up there. I told the promoters of Pacquiao that what they should do is put out a press release that says Pacquiao will fight Mayweather, winner take all. I'd like Mayweather's guys to come up and, hey, man, it's great. You could win the whole thing. And you'd hear Mayweather say, well, I don't think I should fight, and the guy's on drugs. I don't think he wants to fight him. And the reason is, it's a very smart reason. Mayweather is absolutely wealthy, independently wealthy. He never has to fight again. So he's thinking, okay, in his own mind, he's thinking, okay, I can make the fight, make a little less, but I can make the fight. But wait a second. If I win, yeah, I'll become a little more famous and I make a little more money. But heck, if I lose, my whole reputation goes out the window. What do I have to gain and what do I have to lose? It's not worth it for him. Pacquiao, screw it. I'll fight anybody, anytime. Get me the fight. You can tell by his demeanor, That doesn't mean Mayweather's not brave, but he's smart. He's smart. He's got a huge ego. Well, I don't have to tell you that. Any guy goes on TV with the 77 cars and all the jewelry has got to be some type of egomaniac, So that's what I think, is that he does not want to fight the fight. Will it happen? Maybe. Maybe at some point Mayweather will say, you know what? I'm a champion. I'm going to get in the ring I want to prove to everyone I can do this. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. What would you say about this look, like you mentioned just slightly about the drug testing and recently, I don't know, like a lot of fighters have come out and Mike's come out and said a lot of fighters have been taking drugs. Let's talk about Mike specifically. Did you know? This art me asking. Do you know that if Mike took any performance enhancing drugs, to enhance his performance? I thought he didn't need to, but like me, hear what you have to say about it.
Well, of course, after '88 when he left, I don't know what he did, obviously. Mm-hmm. But from '84 to '88, he had trouble reminding himself to take vitamins, or if he was had a cold, to take penicillin. If I went to Mike, and said to Mike, hey, Mike, we're going to do some drugs back, this is good. He'd look at me and say, Steve, man, what are you, out of your mind? What do I need that stuff for, I'll tell you, he had so much pride being a champion. Of course, the drug testing was very, very severe in Las Vegas and in Atlantic City when he had the huge fights here. He had so much pride in being a champion that there was no way that he'd do anything to make that go away. In Las Vegas, I remember one I think it was the Pinkland Thomas fight in May, and we had a huge entourage with us. 2 people, me and Kevin Rooney. That was it with Mike. So you see these guys with Mayweather coming with 66 people and everything. It was me, Kevin, and Mike in the house in Vegas. I did everything. Did the cooking, the cleaning, the shopping. I was the wife there. So I'm washing Mike's underwear, washing Mike's clothes, washing Mike's workout stuff. And one night I go into Mike's room to put his stuff away for the next day, so he has clean stuff. And it's not that late, maybe about 10 o'clock. And the door's halfway ajar, and I open it up. It's dark in the room, but the light shines on the bed. He's not there. I'm saying, what the hell is this? But I hear some noise from the other side of the bed. And I walk around. He's doing sit-ups in the dark.
Ooh.
I say to myself, oh, man, I don't want to be the other guy. I don't want to be the other guy in the ring. That's the type of the discipline during that time period. If he was getting in shape 4 weeks before a fight, I'd be eating in the kitchen, 10 feet from his room. I'd be eating ice cream, this great ice cream. And I hear his door open up, and he comes over, sits down next to me. He hadn't eaten all day. I see a big black hand come over. He touches the ice cream with his finger, puts it in his mouth, tastes it, and walks away. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd take the whole bowl with me if I was him, But that's the type of discipline he had. So to do drugs, if I had even mentioned that to him, he'd say, or Kevin Rooney, forget it. Kevin would say, Steve, are you out of mind? But once he left, I don't know. But something else is that, in my opinion, there's no drugs you can give a fighter that would make him fight any better. If a fighter gets hit on the chin, the ball game is over. There's no drugs you can give a fighter that will make him fight any faster, or make him fight any bigger, or make him fight any stronger. It doesn't exist. In 12 rounds, in 45 minutes, you don't need. If you're running a marathon for 3 hours, that's different. I don't know. Maybe you can take something to keep them cramping up. In boxing, it's interesting. a guy may be fighting, and he looks very, very, very tired in round 6 or 7 or 8. And all of a sudden, he lands a big shot and rocks the other guy. And he opens up with 10, 12 punches really quick. Where did he get that energy from? Where he got it was emotional, psychological. He saw the end of the fight, and that pumped him up. That's what gets a fighter up and going, not the drugs. There's nothing you can give a fighter in between rounds to make him fight any better. Nothing.
So you see that bit with Aaron Pryor bit against Lecter Grail when Panama Lewis gave him some drink, and all of a sudden they said like, yeah, give him the drink, the one that's mixed. So you don't think he said that the drink opened up his lungs and stuff like that? What would you have to say about that?
Bullshit. It sounds good. By the way, the craziest thing is that they only permit you water in the corner.
Yeah.
If a guy wants to drink Pepsi Cola or orange juice, who cares? They're going to test him anyway after the fight. They tested prior. There was nothing in his urine. If a guy wants to drink, a Kool-Aid or beer, let him drink. Who cares what he wants to drink? It won't help. It doesn't help. There are fighters who got sick in their fights without drinking any stuff. They got sick and can't fight. If a guy wants to drink it, that's his problem. By the way, he could have had it in the locker room 20 minutes before. If a guy wants to drink, Pepsi Cola or Haagen-Dazs or ice cream, who cares? It doesn't help. It may, if he could get a stomach ache, that's his problem. That's the Duran no mas thing.
Yeah, and another thing as well. Was you a photographer as well? Because I remember in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, when you was around when Mike first went to Japan. I think it was against Tony T and Tubbs. Were you there at that?
Yes.
Yeah, the photographs in them times it was like I remember because I still remember ITV and they were showing Mike and it was just crazy and they in Japan they love Mike over there and that. Do you remember how the whole thing was when you went to Japan with Mike and that the first time?
Yeah, it was sensational. From the moment we got off the plane. They were incredible people. They treated Mike royally. He was an absolute superstar, and so many funny things happened over there. The very first day, there was a huge press conference. Mike's up at the desk, the dais, answering questions. And, of course, all the questions are in Japanese, and there's an interpreter to tell Mike what the English is. And the first guy gets up and says a question. First press man gets up and asks a question in Japanese. Interpreter tells Mike, how's the trip? And Mike answers. Next guy gets up, question in Japanese. Interpreter asks Mike the question. Mike answers. Third guy gets up in Japanese, and as he's talking, Mike turns to me and says, "Nobody speaks English." I said, "Mike, it's Japan, man." He said, "Oh yeah, that's right. Okay." So it was that everything there was sensational. It was getting used to the time factor because the fight with Tubbs took place at 10 o'clock in the morning there to be 10 o'clock in the evening here. The only problem for Mike was Robin and he had just gotten married a few weeks before, and there was that stuff happening behind the scenes. And it was the first time, I think, that Mike, actually, there were a couple of times when Mike put me under such pressure that I wish I was Customato, and that was one of them. About a week before the fight, Robin had been out there for a few days, went back, and one night we had the whole floor of this new Otani hotel. Our doors were open since there was guards out in the main area where no one can get in. And I'm watching TV one night, sitting on the edge of my bed, and Mike comes in and sits down next to me. And I said, "Dan, this is weird." I said, "Yo, man, what's up?" And he hangs his head. He says, "Steve, it's Robin. She's driving me crazy. I should never have gotten married." I'm going, oh, in my mind, oh, no. I got the heavyweight champion of the world a few days before his defense with Tony Tubbs. On the eve, 4 months later, fighting the biggest fight in the history of boxing against Spinx. And here he is, distraught, disheveled, emotional. I said, oh, man, what the hell do I do? Whenever I was in a position like that, which happened once before, I never say to myself, Steve, what do you do? I say, what would Jim Jacobs do? No, better yet, Bill Cade. No, I got it. What would Customato do right now? And when I thought like that, it clears my brain a little bit, gives me a little more non-emotional answer, more rational. So I look at him and I say, what's happening? He said, Steve, she's driving me crazy. I don't know what to do. I said, Mike, look, first of all, number one, the fight in Friday night. You're going to look sensational against this guy. You're going to score a sensational knockout. I guarantee it. You're going to look great. And when we get back to New York, everything with Robin's going to work out 100%. He says, you mean it? I said, Mike, have I ever been wrong before? He says, no. Mike, you're going to knock out this guy, and we get back to New York, everything's going to be fantastic. He says, okay. And he leaves. And, of course, he knocked out Tony Tubbs.
Yeah.
But Robin, oh, boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
But I had to get him through that time period. The only other time that was like that was even more pressure-packed. In Las Vegas, our very first trip out there was against a guy named Alfonso Ratliff. Big guy, not very good fighter, but a perfect opponent for the undercard of Spinx Tingstad. It was Mike's fight before he fought Burbick. First day in the gym, very famous Johnny Toko's gym in Las Vegas. We're training, maybe 4 rounds of sparring. Kevin says that's enough. Mike walks in the dressing room. I start to pack up my camera equipment. Kevin comes out. He says, we got a problem. What's that? Mike doesn't like it here. He wants to go home. I said, you're kidding. He said, no, he wants to go home. I said, yeah, but we got the fight in 8 days. It's a huge fight. He says, Steve, he wants to go home. I said, okay, let's see what I do. Once again, I start walking the 30 feet to the locker room. What do I do? No. Jim, no. Bill, no. Cuss. What would Cuss do right there? Because I have to do that. Otherwise, I'd be shaking the Mike boots, you know. I walk in there. I said, yo, man, what's up? He says, I don't like it here. I want to go home. I said, why? He said, I don't like it here. I want to go home. I said, okay, look, Mike, you know what? I don't like it here either. I wish I was back in New York. But I guarantee you this. Number one, you're going to knock this guy out. You're going to be the superstar of the show. You're going to be a superstar. People go bananas over you in the fight. That's number one. Number two, if you don't want to come back here anymore, we don't come back here anymore. He said, you mean it? I'm telling you. If you don't want to come back here anymore, we don't come back. He said, okay. That was it.
Wow.
But I tell you, when you have the most valuable sports personality of all time, and you're under that pressure. Now, I know that, Beckham was big, but not as big as Mike worldwide.
No.
And Michael Jordan is big, but not when Mike was Mike. A funny thing happened. We were at the National Sporting Club in England in 1987. Mike was given an award there as Fighter of the Year. And we got there. It was a wonderful time. And we're at the dinner. And who was there from the Who? Roger Daltrey was one of the guests. And at the halftime, at the intermission in the show, the MC said, ladies and gentlemen, it was a room probably about maybe 500 people, 600 people. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to get autographs from any of our guests, please feel free to do so. And people lined up with Daltrey's autograph and Mike's autograph. And Daltrey's line was maybe 100, 150 people. Mike's line went out the door. I don't know. They were downstairs and around the corner.
Wow.
That's the way he was back then. That huge thing. When you mentioned the fight in Japan, the Tubbs fight, that was a new arena they had there that they just built. It was called the Egg, the Big Egg. It was built late 87 to open in early 88, and they had a difficult choice to make. They wanted to announce the arena to the world with some event that the world would look at and say, wow, there's a new arena. So they had a choice. They had Michael Jackson, Madonna, Bruce Springsteen, the Rolling Stones, one other group I forgot, or Mike Tyson. Guess who they picked?
Mike.
They knew that the world would be watching that event. That was the one that, now can you imagine being voted over that? That's the type of drawing power, the type of power he had back then. And that's what bothered me when he was taken over by King, that all that left him. I'm fine, because I can walk down the street and no one knows what I've done or what I've said. But with Mike, it bothered him for a decade. But fortunately now, he's back. He's got wonderful people around him, his wife Kiki, and he's doing incredibly well. Interestingly enough, the spectrum of his life is so unique that, once again, I'm not a historian, but for Mike, from where Mike was in Brooklyn, a punk, to where he went in 86, 87 as the world's most popular athlete, commercial on TV, back down in 94, 5, 6, rape conviction, ear biting, all that stuff, And now back up again to this huge spotlight, the book, the tour, TV shows. I don't know anybody in the world, in the history of the planet, that had that type of spectrum. You know, it's so immense. And he's handling it. And I'll tell you, the pressure on him now is enormous. Interviews and personality tours and TV and newspapers and phoners and the one-man show and the book tours. I don't know how he does it, but that's the athletic, that's the championship quality in him that says, I can do it. You know, that's the real Mike.
Yeah, definitely. I think people, to be honest with you, just love to like Mike. I think it was all about him. I mean, if you, like you said, it was the people around him. Like, to be honest with you, people in London, when he obviously, if you know that, when he came over here to fight one of our fighters he fought in Manchester, and because we never had him in the 80s, we still remember in the 80s. So when he came over, he got flocked so much in Brixton that they put him into a police station just to keep the fans from you know, the fans obviously it was like scenes from the 80s. People just love Mike. So, you know, I'm not like, obviously if he was around all them bad influences, them sort of things would happen. But people, I think generally in the people in the world still have a good impression of Mike. I mean, even though all the things was happening to him and what he's been through, I think generally people still like him.
Yeah, you know, I think that especially in England, you know, he was always loved and adored by the fans. And he knows that, and even here in the United States, if he was around people, I give an example. Even though he broke away from me and Bill, around 1990, maybe even after the Douglas fight, he knew my whole family, Mike, because, you know, they visited us in Las Vegas, and they were at ringside, and he hung with them and everything. He knew my whole family. And in Los Angeles around 1990, my uncle was living there, and he knew Mike pretty well. And my uncle went to a TV show. And there's a big parking lot, and it's getting dark out, and my uncle parks his car and walks to the stage, the entry to the stage. And as he's walking, it's dark out, but he sees these two big black guys coming at him. And he's wondering who they are. And as they get closer, he realizes it's Mike Tyson and another guy. And he looks at Mike, and he says, Mike? And Mike goes, Uncle Marty? Hey, what are you doing here? And Marty says, I'm going to a show. And Mike says, no, come with us, you know. That's the way he really is. When no one's around, and he could be his real person. Whether it's in a crowd, he loves people. He was told there's a boxing guy here in Vegas, a man named Gene Kilroy, who was with Ali for many, many years. And he told Mike, look, the problem you have with a lot of people is when they stop asking you for your autograph, or they stop loving you. That's when you have a problem. That's when you should be unhappy. And Mike realized he was right. You know, the actors or actresses who are upset that people want their autographs, they should know what it's like to live on the street. You know, I don't know about, you know, you like to smack some of them saying, you know, I need my free time. Yeah. That comes with making $20 million a film. You want free time? Move to the Pacific Ocean on some deserted island somewhere. You know, so for fighters, the ones who don't want to do anything for the public, and there've got to be guys like that in baseball, and football, and basketball, and soccer, and every sport. But Mike, he knew that the fans were very special, and he treated them like that. Yeah.